Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sandra Tetley. I am the JSC Historic Preservation Officer, and we are standing at the doors to the Historic Apollo Mission Control Room. I'm going to take you inside and show you around this beautifully and newly restored historic landmark. So let's go in. Okay, come on in. So this room flew not only Gemini and Apollo, but also Apollo Soyuz and Shuttle. And so this is our wall where we have moved all of the shuttle plaques. So it's all representative of Shuttle, including Challenger, which we did lose Challenger in this room. On this side of the wall are the proclamations for the flight controllers. And so now this is the long hallway where we can walk down, and we'll go into the Mission Operations Control Room. This room has been historically and accurately restored down to the smallest of detail, including the coat rack with the coats from the 1960s period. Everything in this room was purchased and placed based on historic photographs and imagery, and so nothing here is random. It's all documented and placed properly. We were not able to restore the Recovery Operations Control Room, but this is a representative photo taken from this exact location looking into the room. And according to Mr. Kranz, this is one of his favorite pieces of the restoration. This flag was flown on Apollo 10, some of the artifacts that we've restored that were original in the room. And then if you come around here, you can now see that the consoles are lit, and the documents and items that are placed on the consoles represent that certain flight controller. And we've documented everything, and we've interviewed the flight controllers. And so when they come in here, they really feel like they're stepping back into 1969. So we'll come around here. We want to show you one of our greatest accomplishments in this is the recreation of all the summary display screens and the mission clocks. We have taken 5 parts of the Apollo 11 mission: the descent and landing, the first steps, the reading of the plaque that was on the LEM, when President Nixon called the moon and that talked to the astronauts, and then recovery. And so we've had to recreate all those 5 pieces of the mission, and we're going to talk to Dr. Adam Graves, who was the technical lead on this entire project. Adam?
Yeah, as she said, one of the more difficult tasks was recreating these screens. A lot of the photos and video that we have, believe it or not, we're interested in the people that worked here. So it's really hard to find photos or video evidence of exactly what was on the screen at all the right times. Actually, these 2 screens on the left here were some of the most difficult to figure out what was originally there. Not just because the photographs focused on people, but there was so much washout with the white. So in an old photograph, you really can't tell the details of that. So we labored for probably 6-8 months to figure out what was on those 2 screens until we finally got just the right video to show just a little corner of what was happening there. And the screen here that has the 79, that's one of the more interesting stories. We actually had one of the former shuttle guys, Troy LeBlanc, help us reenact this. When you watch the experience, you'll be able to see little hands come in from time to time and move the astronaut figures around to where they were being tracked on the moon while they moved around. So recreating that was a really special thing to do.
And on this chart, during the visitor experience, you can actually see the command module actually does move and did move in real life. And so we actually do have him tracking when we do the visitor experience.
That's right. We were able to figure out from the photos and video that during AOS, when they could communicate with Michael Collins, the command module was blue, and then when it goes outside of these lines, it was red. It's kind of another neat little feature to look for when you visit.
And then down here at the bottom of the screen, these are the mission roses, and it was superstitious that they were donated by an anonymous donor before each flight, and so the flight director always wanted to make sure that the mission roses were here before we launched. So it was very important to us to have these here. We had them up by the consoles on Monday, but when Mr. Kranz came in for an interview, he said the flight roses have to be down at the front of the room. So we moved them down for the ribbon cutting. So if you come on around here, we'll show you what the consoles look like. And while we move over here, we'll show you this special mirror. This mirror was flown, it was a part of the Apollo 13 command module, and it was brought back for the flight controllers by the crew of Apollo 13, and they brought it back when the mission controller saved the crew. And it was originally placed on the other side of the MOCR, and it was placed here by the water fountain later because when the flight controller took a drink, then they saw a hero in the mirror. A neat story about this is that when we were restoring the room and we had all the medallions off the wall, we knew that Jim Lovell was coming in. And so my brilliant technical lead just thought about it, and he brought the mirror out from storage and had it placed over there. So as soon as Mr. Lovell came around the corner, he pointed to this wall looking for his mirror. And so we knew at that time it needed to go back at this place. And so we made the decision to go ahead and put it back over here. And that was validated when Fred Hayes came in one day and also looked for its place over here. So it's a very important place. So, okay, we'll walk around here and look at the consoles. Everything on these consoles, which were restored by the Cosmosphere in Kansas. A lot of the gray furniture we got from on site, so it's authentic to JSC. But a really cool story on these are the flight controller chairs, and they had to be restored. And I'm going to let David Buchek tell you about the difficulty in restoring these chairs.
David Buchek, I'm the restoration architect, Mission Control. So these chairs, it took us about a year to looking at photographs. We identified the chairs made by the Steelcase furniture company, and we identified the model number from the late 60s. And eventually, through working with their archive in Michigan, we received a sample, a line card from the catalog with actual pieces of fabric and colors of vinyl and seat fabric on that, and we were able to then figure out which color and fabric we had. Now, we were able to find vinyl that was very close match, but we could never find the seat fabric that would match what was actually on the chairs in 1969. So after a year of being told various furniture companies would not make the fabric for us, we talked to a local weaver here in Houston. There's a weaving guild here in Houston, 70 years old. And Mary Welch, who's a wife of another architect who I know here in town, she hand wove all of this fabric on a loom in her studio. And then we went to the upholsterer that was helping us with the project, Mike Panetta with Matisa Upholstery, and reupholstered these chairs to be exactly as they were in July of 1969. So we're also, we were responsible for all the things in the room, like the carpet, the wallpaper, the ceiling, and also all of the things that you see on the consoles were things that are from research and staged. Below the carpet, which is, the carpet was removed in the 80s when the shuttle program was moved into this room. So what we have is a very close reproduction of that original carpet. We were not allowed to use any original artifacts in the room. So everything that you see is an actual coffee mug or ashtray matching the actual coffee mug or ashtray that was here when the moon landing first occurred. So again, through research, and Lainey Harris-Finch will talk a little bit more about that process, about how she found those items.
We're going to let Jordan talk about these interesting boxes that are at on these steps.
So in photographs, we can see that there's a box, but we weren't sure the material or how it was held up, because you can see there's not enough room really between the edge of the console and the ledge. One of the retired flight controllers actually provided us with a hand sketch that just showed, a square and then a line coming down. Once we received the higher resolution video, we actually found a still image of the just kind of this portion, so we could determine that it was a hinged lid that we kind of replicated. We've determined the proper angle for it to hold up, and we got it working.
So and that was confirmed by Jack Knight, who came in and said, yeah, that's how they did. They flipped down and held the box up. So let's go up here and see this second row. And by the way, this is called the trench. And So if you look at those matches down there, so this was named the trench because there was a Korean artilleryman who was at this console, and as the P-tubes came out, they came out on the floor and right here in the bottom. And so when the P-tubes would come out and they bump up against each other and they would knock each other out, and he said it sounded like being back in the trench during the Korean War. So that's why how this was named the trench. Okay, we'll go up here and we'll talk to Miss Delaney, who probably has the largest eBay account now in history.
Hi, I'm Delaney Harris-Finch with Stern & Buchek Architects, and I'm the Historic Preservation Specialist. I worked a lot on the furnishings, the furniture, bookcases, coat racks, coats, and a lot of the items that are just on top of the console. So one of the biggest challenges were the mugs. They were not, government-issued mugs. They were the mugs that each flight controller brought in from home or scavenged. So making sure that we found the right mugs based off of different photos and videos and every resource we had. This one is particularly lovely. It's the Raffia Ware mug. And there's an RC Cola that is seen at this console through several days of the Apollo 11 mission. We got our Solo Cup holder, which is a lovely plastic holder for then Solo Cups. As we work our way down, this mug was always seen around the Assistant Flight Director console. It has a double finger hold and kind of a nice little ombre top going on. And one of my favorite mugs is the Flight Director Flu mug. So Gene Kranz was gifted this mug with a flu shot on the back, Flight Director white crossed out and put flu, FD for Flight Director. And this mug actually is not the original. I was able to recreate it from photos and video, painted it myself, but we fooled Mr. Kranz when he was in here a few days ago. He picked it up and was convinced it was the original, so I feel like I was a success. We have the lid to a thermos that was sitting on the flight directors. And we have, of course, the ashtrays, pencil sharpeners, manuals, the headsets, the pens and pencils, the cigarettes, an extra box of pencils, staplers, the flags that were passed out at the end of the mission, tobacco products, pipes, stopwatches.
We couldn't find this this paper holder, so I cut one down to make it the right size, just because we couldn't find the actual that size.
You can't find
today.
a half size.
And probably the coffee mug, the other great story.
Okay, they're going to show you the coffee pot, which is one of the cooler things.
So back in this area, the flight controllers set up their own kind of coffee station. And from multiple photos and videos, we're able to finally hone in on this was the original coffee percolator, and it's called the Regal Rocket. It looks like a rocket. And I was able to find one brand new in the box vintage on eBay, never used before.
This is the red phone, which I guess was for the Department of Defense. So it was, they did call the White House, basically.
They coordinated with the Navy to pick up the astronaut.
So again, that connection back to the Roker, that Cassandra mentioned, that the photograph we put on glass. And so what's interesting too, as you'll see in this room, all the screens, there's a room behind the screens where the rear projection for these screens occur. That room is called the Bat Cave, where it's a very dark, the room is painted black. And the Roker had its own Bat Cave as well, and you can see that it also had screens. And that's where the armed services were monitoring where the astronauts would be splashing down and coordinating ships and their recovery efforts and all those things.
Okay, I'll tell you a bit about the consoles. So these consoles, we took out the CRTs that were original to the consoles. We had used these consoles during the shuttle program. So the modules in the consoles, each individual module could be taken out and changed out as technology changed. So by the time the shuttle ended, and this was sort of a hybrid Apollo and shuttle configuration, we put them back everything in Apollo, but the CRTs we could not use, we could not light up anymore. So we put flat screen monitors behind them, or flat screens, and then we were able to use a player behind it to project this imagery. And what we did in the simulation control room, as mitigation to changing these artifacts, we put the original CRTs back into those consoles, and so those are 100% Apollo, and no one can go in that room. So that was able to, we lit up the consoles using small LED lights behind these buttons, so it was a non-destructive way that we were able to light these up. And then when we do play the visitor experience, everything works together to tell the story of Apollo 11. Now Adam's going to tell you, if you back up here, he's going to tell you about the medallions that are on the wall.
Yeah, we'll have to come way over here though to do that. I know we're talking a lot about the restoration and all the artifacts and the consoles, and you know, we really did try to do our best to be historically accurate and match kind of what happened in the past, but really this is about honoring the men that worked here and you know, accomplish this great feat of sending men to the moon and bringing them back safely. And you know, one of the great parts about bringing them back safely is the flight director is chosen as kind of the MVP of the mission to hang these medallions out here. And so we've placed all the medallions back in their original locations for Apollo 11, but then we added the rest of Apollo era to the top of that fur down up there. And each one of those were restored by Yanni Langer. Did just a great job of bringing some of those back to life and cleaning the scum off of them just enough, but you know, making sure we didn't remove any history from them. Just did an outstanding job. Over in the left here, you see the flag. That flag has kind of a really neat story. It's actually just exactly like the ones they plant on the moon each time they go to the moon, and that particular one is from Apollo 17. Originally, there was no flag on that wall, so there's a little bit of a you know, difference from if you look at Apollo 11 photographs from this location right here down to that corner. You'll see just a standing flag on the floor. It was during the Apollo mission they brought in to this south side door over here a flag that looks like that, and just kind of set it on a pedestal on the floor. And then Apollo 12 through 16, it flew on the wall back where you see it now for all those missions. But before they went up for Apollo 17, they took that flag off the wall, took it to the moon. So they had two flags that went to the moon during Apollo 17. One of which was the original Apollo 11 flag, and as well as the Apollo 17 flag that they were supposed to have with them anyway and plant on the moon. Well, when they come back, they presented this flag that you see here back to the mission control guys, and just kind of, you know, and they said this flag has been where the other flag has been planted and presented as this gift to mission control. And so that was the flag that was meant to be on the moon for Apollo 17, but the one that's actually up there is the original Apollo 11 flag. So a really, really great story there.
So just a couple other details before we let you go. One of the cool things that we had the benefit of is using technology to help us, which we were able to use eBay, which we got a lot of these artifacts to come and help us. We purchased them from eBay for the restoration, and also in the visitors viewing room, there were tops to the ashtrays that are behind the seats that the people have taken the tops off as souvenirs, and so we were able to 3D print those. And so it's really cool that we're able to use some of this technology to help us with this restoration. And one final story, because it's getting the validation of the flight controllers has been very important to us, because they are the ones we're trying to honor with this and the activities that they did in this room. And so their validation and their approval was important to us, because then we knew that we had done a really good job. And Monday morning when Mr. Kranz came in to be interviewed by ABC News, it was kind of rainy in Houston, and so he had a raincoat on. He came in this door, walked up these steps because he was going to be interviewed here, and he hung up his coat just like it was another day at work. And so that's what we really thought that we'd done a really good job since we got that validation.
And since we're looking at the coats, there's a little bit of an Easter egg here behind the coats. We have to pull these off. There's an original piece of wallpaper you can see in here. Yeah, you can see the line there between old and replicated. So we did do our best to preserve as much as possible in this room the original artifacts and furnishings.
Okay, and we had one question about how much all this cost. And so totally, this costs a little over $5 million, and which we think is a pretty good deal for what we restored here. So it'll be good for hopefully another 50 or plus years. So without further ado, we appreciate you coming. You can come and see Mission Control Center by going through Space Center Houston, and you can sit in the viewing room and see the visitor experience, and then look at all this great stuff and relive those moments in July when we made history. So thank you, and y'all have a good weekend.